Well, hello everyone. My name's Simon Tupman. I'm hosting the Law Chat series, which is a series of insights and inspirational conversations with luminaries from the legal sector around the world. Welcome to you all, wherever you're joining us from. We've got people from 5 countries who are joining us today, and 6 in fact, if we count our guests. So whether in the Northern Hemisphere or whether you're in Australasia or in North America, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Today we're going to be talking about life during and after COVID, and I'd like to welcome the first guest in our series today. And he is an author, innovator, and advisor. He's a visiting professor in legal innovation at the Calgary Law School. He's a fellow of the College of Law Practice Management. He's been the Fast Case 50 Global Legal Innovator. He is a former partner of Baker McKenzie and author of 2 critically acclaimed books, and he joins us now from Toronto in Canada. Mitch Kowalski, hello, how are you?
Simon, great. Getting a little tired of the lockdown. I think I'm probably a few days away from going to a man bun with this mop I have on my head, but otherwise we're faring okay. We're faring okay. And let me just see if we can see this. Does this, it doesn't come through. I don't know if you recognize this book.
I see a banana there, so it rings a bell.
It's Why Lawyers Should Eat Bananas by this guy, Simon Tupman. I'm not sure if you've seen this book at all. It's quite good. Anyways, it finally came through, and I've read bits and parts of it from friends of mine who had it, so it's brilliant.
Can you believe it's 20 years ago since I wrote that?
I know, it's too bad I wasn't in New Zealand. I'd get you to sign it, but we'll save it for next time.
In those days I had hair. Fortunately, I don't have it now because as of midnight last night, the innovative barbers here in New Zealand opened up and there were a queue of men down the street waiting to have their hair cut. So, full marks to them. So how are you doing for a hairdo?
Yeah, it's really, really messy, and everybody's counting the days till my wife wants the hairdresser to be open. I want my barber to be open. So we'll get through it.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, we're here to talk about life during and after COVID. I last saw you 5 years ago at the Future Firm Forum here in Queenstown, New Zealand. What have you been up to since then and leading up to COVID?
Wow, lots of stuff. 5 years is a really long time when you think about it. It goes by quick, but when you start counting the stuff that you've been doing. So doing the teaching at University of Calgary has gone quite well. The students are liking that course. It's a course on innovation and legal services and the kinds of things that you can do to be innovative as a lawyer, what kind of structures. We look at regulatory issues and really trying to prepare the students for life, in the future, which for them is their entire career. And for, many of us, it's, mid-career or so on. So trying to get them set up and ready. And been doing a lot of speaking, spent a lot of time in Australia, a bunch of time in the UK. I think I told you off camera when we were talking earlier that I was so excited this year to get my gold status on BA just before the lockdown. So now it's completely useless to me. Hopefully BA, if BA is on the call or anybody has connections to BA, just get them to roll it over for a year. That would be much appreciated.
And I know you said you were supposed to be in London today, but judging by the picture behind you, it looks like you're at Notting Hill Gate platform. But anyway.
Exactly.
Hey, listen, I know one of the things that you did in the last 5 years was to write a second book, The Great Legal Reformation. And obviously in the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of innovations taking place in the legal services sector. My question for you is, do you think COVID has advanced the progress of the Great Reformation?
Yeah, that's such a hard question because I have to balance what I really want it to be versus what reality tells us it will be. So I think change requires something, a burning platform, something to push it forward. It can't be something that people have to be convinced of doing. That's the long way to do it. So we need a sense of urgency. The good thing about COVID is it's forced us very urgently to do something completely different. The question really is, now that we've seen we can do all these things that law firms have said for years and years and years, oh, we can't do that. We can't do work from home. That's just not what we do. That's unseemly. That's terrible. it's impossible. We couldn't possibly do this. How could we trust that our people will actually be working? Oh my gosh, we need to be watching them every time, every minute and every day. And all of a sudden now, in order to survive, they had to go to that model and do the workarounds. And many of them have done it relatively quickly. But my concern is that it's all being positioned as temporary, that these are temporary measures. And so the question will be for leadership, whether or not this is really temporary or whether it's not temporary. And so I'd like to think, and hence my hesitation at the beginning was, I'd like to think that that's where we will go, that people will say, gosh, I guess we can do it. I'm hoping that employees and lawyers of these firms will now have enough evidence to say, look, we did it for 2 months or 3 months or whenever we get back. There's simply no logical or good reason to us to not do that. I hope when they look at the financials and see, wow, we were paying 3 months of rent for space that we didn't use, that's a lot of money. We could have saved that money if we'd went, in a different direction. And hopefully the rest of the market, and I think what's more inspiring to me on this question is that the rest of the market is starting to say these things. We see Ernst & Young coming out yesterday in Australia in the AFR saying that 20% of their people are quite happy to continue to work from home. Another 20% don't want to go back in the office until it's totally safe. And we see large companies around the world really starting to rethink their office now that they've been paying for empty offices and are starting to say, no, we're going to restructure our workforce. So hopefully that will carry on into legal when they look at the rest of the world. But gosh, I'm cautiously optimistic that change will stay.
So what aspects of the working practices that changed in the last 4 weeks do you welcome? You touched on working from home. Any other aspects towards all of this?
I think working from home forces you to think about how you do your work differently, because you're now in a completely different atmosphere. So you have to do your work in a way that is much more efficient and and provides better service for your clients. So you don't have an admin assistant anymore. You don't have all the accoutrements that you had in your office. So it forces everyone to really rethink how they run their practice. You can't print out every email anymore. So hopefully that's what lawyers and allied professionals are doing in these firms as they're being stuck in this weird area, that they're rethinking why they're doing certain things or why they did it and whether or not they really need to do it, because now that they have to do everything themselves, it's too clunky for them.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, a lot of the feedback I've had from lawyers that I've spoken with in the past few weeks, I think have been quite surprised at how beneficial the spin-off has been, if you like, that people responded rather better than they had anticipated. It's had the effect of opening people's minds where previously they'd been resistant to any form of change, because in this case they didn't have any choice. And even one or two saying, I'm actually getting used to working from home and doing work in my own time and not having to be seen around the office at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I guess there will be a lot of firms who will say, look, if it works for you and we can get the outcomes that our clients are expecting from us, then why not?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if it would be interesting to see what firms are saying to their clients now, or as we, roll out of this and saying, what was our level of service during this? How did you feel about it? Because we're thinking of going in a different direction. What are the clients saying about it? And my guess is that the clients probably are saying, I'm pretty much okay with it. I didn't see, a massive decrease in service, or maybe I did, in which case I have to rethink my law firm that I'm going to use in the future, because these guys couldn't handle moving, when they hit some stress. But I think the interesting thing that I'm also hearing a lot of is the isolation. Like, working from home is great, But that social factor is problematic for a number of people. I know for me personally, I've worked from home for many, many years, but it was always in and out. I was out and about, I was talking with people and so on. So I wasn't, in prison, for lack of a better word, for days on end, not going out. And that I found hard. And that's what a lot of people are saying is, maybe we don't, the work from home is great, but not 100% of the time. And so how do we remodel that in a way that makes sense? Where do we have weekly meetings in the office? Do we come in 2 days a week or 3 days a week or whatever it is? And what I also would be interested in seeing if firms were doing this is who's communicating with their employees now? Are they having group meetings? Like, are they having regular communication throughout this time period so that people don't feel as isolated? So, you're not calling about a particular file. It's like, every Monday we have a group meeting. We're going to do this, or every couple days we're going to have a group meeting, just checking in, saying, hey guys, how you doing? Everything okay? This is not a business call. I'm just calling in as the leader of the group or the leader of the firm to just say, hey, is everybody doing okay? I know it's a crazy time. And my sense is there's few and far between firms who are doing that. It is trying to put the old model of just go ahead and work into a new situation. So lots of things floating around.
Let me ask you, obviously, what's happened in the past 6 weeks or so has forced many firms to make changes, which a lot of observers like you and I think long-term will be beneficial. But who do you think will be the first in line to benefit from these changes? Is it going to be the large firms, the boutique firms, or even the startups, little innovative firms that are high street firms that are having to rethink the way they do things?
I think the firms that are better placed are those smaller firms because their management is smaller. They don't have to deal with as many people. They're a lot more nimble in that space. I think the large firms will move only to the extent that they have financial considerations coming up. So I'm thinking if your leases are up in the next 2 years, you're going to completely rethink your strategy because we've gone through this. If you're locked into a long-term deal, then I think perhaps that, you're going to forget about COVID-19 by the time, you're up for lease renewal. So that's how I see the market really breaking up on those two sectors.
Yeah.
Somebody just had a comment on weekly meetings.
Yeah, I'm just going to say to everyone, feel free to use the chat button there. And if you want to make an observation or ask Mitch a question, feel free. But I see Caroline's come up with a comment there. Caroline is a lawyer in New Zealand, I know, who said, we implemented a twice daily 10-minute Zoom check-in with our team, works well, and we've been able to share concerns, etc., being isolated amongst other benefits of doing this.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's fantastic. And I'm sure that your team really welcomes that. And so good on you.
Let's just, if I can, apart from this cultural reboot that we're seeing within the providers of legal services, can I just, drawing on your background as general counsel and having served in-house counsel, do you see any implications here for in-house counsel? I mean, obviously the organizations they work for are going through the same issues that everyone else is. If you were still an in-house counsel, how would you be responding to the current pressures?
Yeah, well, okay, so I am gone back to build out a general counsel role for a company in Canada. So in that sense, I am actually as well. But I think what this shows us from an in-house counsel perspective, it's the same issues that you have as an external counsel is how do I get the most out of my team and how do I service my business unit heads the best way in a much in a more agile way. And so in-house, I think a lot about automation is how much of this stuff can I get off my desk and get the business units to do themselves? Because quite frankly, that's what they want to do. They don't want to have to deal with me. It's not that they don't like me, but it is the fact that it is, it's about speed and getting things done. So to the extent that I can get things done by the business heads themselves, they're much happier. And it is much clunkier to do it over Zoom or whatever than it would be if I could just walk across the hall to speak to the business guy, or they just pop into my office and say, hey, you know, we got a question, we got this done in five or 6 seconds. I think the concern though, Simon, for in-house counsel is, and I can tell you I'm doing this and everybody is doing this, certainly in North America, is we're looking at our external service providers and saying, hang on a second, who adapted to this the best? Because I want to work with a service provider where I'm not going to have a drop in service, you know, every time we have a pandemic. And I'm of a firm believer that this isn't going to be the last pandemic we're going to have, or there's going to be something else that's going to require businesses to be shut down, or you know, the building burns down, there's the wildfire, there's a hurricane, or there's a typhoon. So I want to know that my service providers all the way through the company, including legal, will actually be there tomorrow. And if law firms are showing me that they're slow to get on that bus and slow to get their heads around this stuff, and if I see service providers cutting people but keeping the partner profits as protected as possible, but they're letting go of wide swaths of people, you know, that puts something in my head as to, you know, are these the guys I want to work with? Is that those service providers, is that consistent with what we believe as a company, what our values are? Because our company's not, you know, we're protecting our people. And if our service providers can't last a month without cutting people, yet partnership draws are only cut by 20%, that sends a message to me as a client. That might be a bit controversial, but that's how I feel.
Fair enough. We don't mind a bit of controversy. A question here from Juan in North America. I hope I understand the question correctly. You can see that will alternative legal service firms have a push to grow and expand? I guess there's an opportunity there. I don't know whether it's a mandate or an imperative that Juan's specifically talking about, but do you think certainly there's an opportunity for them to grow and expand?
Yes, I think 2 points. First of all, great question, because I think there are now a lot of lawyers who are at big firms all around the world who are saying, gosh, do I really need a big firm? I've been operating out of my office, in my home office or on my dining room table for a month. My clients seem to be reasonably happy with it. Am I giving too much of my profits from my clients to the law firm? I think there's a lot of those wheels starting to turn, and those alternative legal service firms that I was so quick to dismiss and say, forget about it. I don't know how they could possibly do it. I think that we will see people starting to jump, at least to create boutiques, if not to go to alternative services. And I think on the client side of that is the clients are saying, well, I'm dealing with people who are notionally part of a big firm, but they're really just in their own home office or their dining room table. So maybe my views of whether I need a big firm are changing as well. And maybe I'm much more open to going to a new kind of firm. So the answer is, for me, is yes, lots of opportunity out there. Doors should be opening.
John's question here, the next one down, is obviously alluding to the fact that I think law firms are having to be far more outcome driven than input driven. And so therefore, what might be the implications of all of this when it comes to pricing strategies and the way that firms bill?
Well, I've known John for quite some time, and John is a firm believer in the billable hour. And that is really for him the be all and end all. And I applaud him for his work in keeping the billable hour going. And those of you who know John know I'm completely being facetious there. I think this. I think that's right. I think we'll be looking at different fee structures, and I think that goes to Juan's question, is that as we go to different models, we're going to be looking at different pricing strategies, because we can actually do better in a lot of cases than counting our hours. And so I think that's true. I think that really this process is going to open up a lot of ideas and get a lot of wheels turning, and thinking about how much money they're leaving on the table, or whether they're really getting what they value from the relationships.
You read that.
Yeah, I read
I've got
that.
another question here. This question not coming on the feed, but it's from Melissa in Australia, who says there are so many innovative firms doing things differently in terms of truly flexible and remote working, having purpose beyond profit, servicing clients in ways that work better for clients, pricing on value rather than time. John, I like that one. Yep. And really thinking creatively. The question is, why is it that the profession is so fixated on waiting for big law firms to do these things rather than acknowledging where the real innovation is actually happening?
Right. Well, I'll draw upon sort of my background in legal journalism. I did a little bit of that in Canada as well. Is the big firms tend to suck all the oxygen out of the room. They have the biggest marketing departments. They also are name brands that people like to read about. And so journalism tends to really go for those kinds of stories and build those kinds of relationships. And I think because big firms deal with a big segment of the market, it's hard for journalists to get too excited and the media to get too excited about all the really good stuff that's going on, like that Hive is doing and Free Range is doing, and all sorts of new law firms are doing, because the market share is not huge. You know, whether we like it or not, for all the good work that you're all doing out there, the amount of market share you're taking is still relatively small. And until we get to a stage where there's a huge critical mass, where we're getting closer and closer to taking massive swaths of work away, that's unfortunately how it's going to be perceived. This doesn't mean you should stop doing it. And of course, you know, everybody would like to be perceived as you know, doing really good work, and it's hard to be ignored. I would hope that you guys just keep plugging away, because it'll eventually come. And hopefully this COVID-19 will be a big bonus for you, and you will start to see, you'll be chipping away people from the larger firms into your groups and building something special. And that hopefully would be the story of 2021, to see, you know, a nice little swing, and that will put everybody on notice that this stuff is real and this stuff is here to stay.
Mitch, I'm interested also in your views on the next generation of lawyers coming through, from the perspective of both law schools and what they're producing, but also from the perspective of employers recruiting law graduates now. Let's start with the latter. If you were looking at recruiting young lawyers to your firm that might say have got quite a bit of history and being a little traditional in its ways, what would you be saying to young people applying for jobs these days?
I'd be saying, first of all, good luck, because it's a terrible time to be coming out. It's probably, you know, we've gone through a lot of bad times, and this is probably the worst. You know, certainly the students that I taught this year are worried and concerned about whether or not they're going to get a job. What I tell them, and this wouldn't change to COVID, is that you need to be adaptable, you need to be flexible, and you need to think beyond just black letter legal kinds of issues. So the message is really the same. It's just much more important now, because there are fewer people, fewer opportunities out there, and the opportunities are going to go to those who can be adaptable, can show that they have some value beyond just being the smartest student in the class.
You know, we have any law professors listening in today, but out of interest, law schools, are there implications for them in the future?
Well, the problem with the law school, there's a couple of issues with law schools. It's number one, like law firms and like lawyers, if they don't have to change, they don't change. And that's why law schools have been traditionally doing the same old thing, even though some of them will say that they're innovative and maybe they're doing things, you know, a little bit innovative, but not not terribly innovative. It's still built around space. And, you know, Richard Sesson has a really good quote about courts where he says, is justice a place or is it a service? And so I think that works across a lot of spectrum. It works with law schools as well. Is a legal education a place, or is it something that you receive through some kind of process? And I think law schools, now that they have to, they can't have classes, even in September, where our school year in North America starts in September, a lot of schools are already saying, we're not going to have in-person classes for September. University of Calgary is still sitting on the fence on that. I'm pretty much decided that my course is going to be online, but because they haven't been forced to do it, they haven't done it. Now that they're forced to do it, then the change will come. The other part of the problem, the puzzle, at least in North America, are the regulatory issues around law schools. And we have this bizarre rule in Canada where we say that only a certain percentage of classes can be done online. There's the regulatory body actually requires vast majority of courses to be in person, which makes zero sense. And hopefully that will, that will change because of this, and it won't be termed as an emergency measure. It'll actually be something that we move forward. And then, like, think about this, Simon. This is something I've kicked around with the dean at my school, who's very progressive, and he's a really good mate. He said, like, Ian, what if we just did a complete law school online? What would the tuition for that look like? Right? The tuition would scrunch down to nothing. We could get a lot more people getting a legal education. We can have a debate whether we need more lawyers or less lawyers, but at least that sort of, that barrier to getting a legal education would be gone in Canada, and it would be pretty cool to do. But so be it.
Good stuff. Thank you for that. Hey, look, we've got another 3 minutes left. Just before we wrap up, and before we do, I want to make an announcement too about the next episode in the Law Chat series. But my final question for you today is, for those people who are tuning in and maybe watching this recording subsequently, what advice would you have for them as we are flattening the curve and coming out? What advice would you have for them to get back on track again, and without reverting back to 2019, moving forward?
I think it starts with leadership. I think you have to really look at your leaders. Who's leading your firm? Do you have confidence in them? How they performed in this? How did they not see this coming? How did they not prepare the firm for this? Or maybe they did. Start to look at what are the skill sets that will put you in good stead over the long term to make your firm more resilient. I think that the takeaway from COVID really is that firms are pretty fragile, and they shouldn't be this fragile. And so focus on resilience and whatever that takes.
Excellent advice. Well, look, thank you very much for that. I'm going to, if I can, just let people know about the next date in their diaries. For those of you watching and have enjoyed this chat today, make a date in your diary for the 11th of June at 2 p.m. New Zealand time. And I will be having a discussion with 3 very dynamic women from Australia. We've got Karen Finch from Legally Yours. We're going to be joined with Rose Cocciaro from Adelaide, the principal of Resolve Divorce, and also Melissa Lyon, who I know has been on this call today from Hive Legal. It's going to be, I think, a really interesting and active discussion looking at innovation in the legal sector and creative thinking. So my thanks to you, Mitch Kowalski in Toronto. Thank you very much for joining us. Stay well, look after yourself, keep up the good work, and all the best to everyone else out there. We look forward to seeing you soon. Take care, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye-bye now.